we got a responsible, Infused Innovations got a responsible AI certification back in, I think it was late 2019. So we saw the writing on the wall that, AI is not slowing down. We need to make sure that our staff that are developing solutions in AI are doing it with an eye towards, is it trustworthy? Is it responsible? Is it fair?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have an update before we get into this week's episode. Why? Because a week has passed. So we recorded this before Thanksgiving, but a week in the world of AI is like a year. So a lot has happened. Specifically, we talked about Sam Altman and OpenAI. So Jeff and I discussed how it was interesting and why did he let go and will he come back? And we do have our theory, so stay tuned, watch to hear what we think, what happened. But here's what happened. Sam Altman is back. So he came back after the board mysteriously and unexpectedly let him go on a Friday. He came back right before Thanksgiving so that he can still now be the CEO. Now there's a pending investigation on the board of why did they let him go. Actually, the CEO that they interim had in there, Emmett Shears, he said, wait, I'm not going to be a CEO until I find out what grounds was Sam Altman fired upon, as well as his co-founder and president, Greg. So they looked into it. They said there is no grounds right now. There is an investigation into it. Sam Altman is back. A new board is in there. And in the meantime, OpenAI is like, here's a new feature, by the way. So for all of you out there that have ChatGPT but don't pay for the premium version, good news for you. ChatGPT Voice is now available. So for those that use like the normal ChatGPT 3.5, you could use on your app, iOS or Android, open it up and then click the voice activation button. And now you can have a conversation with ChatGPT. It's amazing. So go test it out. Ask it, hey, what's up with Sam Altman? Is he back? Why is he back? What's going on in the world of OpenAI? So that's the latest update, just to catch you up from since we last recorded this before Thanksgiving. And hope you enjoy this episode with Jeff, which there'll be another intro in a second. So get ready and ride this AI wave. Hi, this is Chris Parisi, host of the AI Wave, the only podcast that combines the world of AI and business with a big focus on Rhode Island. And in this week's episode, we have Jeff Wilhelm. He's the CEO and founder of Infused Innovations. He is a great lead to talk about AI and cybersecurity, the impact of AI on education. I mean, we talked about Microsoft. We talked about the latest hottest topic, Sam Altman and OpenAI and his insights from that, as well as some insights from Microsoft Ignite and how you could use Copilot for your business. I mean, we talked about a lot. So get ready, hop on board and ride this AI wave. All right, welcome to this week's episode. We have Jeff Wilhelm, the CEO and founder of Infused Innovations. Jeff, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Chris. Nice to be here.
I mean, Jeff, you are a busy man. I also have here, you are a mentor with Year Up and RI Hub VMS program.
Yeah.
You're also a board member of URI Launch Lab, Rocky Hill County Day. I'm not stopped. We got advisor to multiple startups and tech companies, a chairman of the North Kingston IT Advisory Committee. You won multiple awards with Tech 10, C-Suite Award winner at PBN. You were also a 40 under 40 like me, although I am younger. That's a lot, Jeff. Yeah. First off, congratulations on all of that. Second off, how do you even have the time to do anything?
Thanks. Thank you. And a dad to two kids.
I was going to say, you got two kids as well. Right. That's the number one job we have.
Yes, that is. But no, it's been an honor to be, recognized for some of those things. The PBN awards are great because we all know you and I were together on a PBN panel just a few weeks ago.
That's right, about cybersecurity. We want to dive into that. But before we do all of that, tell our audience a little bit about yourself. We just listed off a lot here, but you are a dad of two great kids. You are living in Rhode Island. Are you from Rhode Island?
Originally Connecticut, so I didn't make it very far.
Well, we're glad to have you.
Thanks.
And yeah, like what led you to get into this field? Were you always interested in tech as a kid? Were you geeking out?
I
Um,
was. Yeah, actually, funny enough, the very first book report I did, I think it was, elementary school or whatever,
yeah.
fourth or fifth grade or something. It wasn't so much a book report as a how to program games in BASIC book report. So yeah, I think I was always
Wow.
interested in computers. Um, and I had some teachers that really pushed me growing up, which was really important, for sort of the development of that. And then I moved to Rhode Island, went to University of Rhode Island, College of Business,
Hmm.
and MIS degree, and here I am still.
So let's talk about when you were in, you talked about a few mentors there, and that you grew up with when it comes to, I believe, high school, right?
Yep.
What are some examples where you used technology that you really kind of stood out or really taught you something?
I had two teachers in high school that really pushed me. One was David Topitzer. He was a history teacher, and I've always loved history. He was saying, Jeff, you got to do National History Day, right? Teachers always try to push the kids to do that stuff, which is great, right? And I was like, I'm gonna do it on Louis Armstrong because I was in jazz band at the time.
Oh,
I
cool.
liked it, yeah. So I'm gonna do Louis Armstrong, and I remember, he was like, "Oh well, you just need, your trifold board,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
We've
we
all
remember
seen
that
it. Oh yeah,
trifold.
right." And there was a bunch of other kids in the school that were doing it, and would see everyone working on their trifold boards. I was like, I got to do something a little bit different. I love technology. How can I, spice this up a little bit, right? I cut a big hole right in the middle of the trifold board, and my school had, it must have been one of the first ones. It was like a touch screen
Yeah, that's
monitor. This
crazy.
is in the 90s. I think it
Yeah.
was like 96, 97, something like that. We had this touch screen, and I taught myself HTML, and I built an entire web-based touchscreen interface that ran full screen on
That's
this
amazing.
touchscreen, and it was all about Louis Armstrong. So you could learn about his history, the background of
Like
Louis Armstrong.
press a button and
Yep.
then,
It would play music. It would show videos of Louis Armstrong. Again,
wow.
this was the 90s, so I felt pretty cool. I made it really far, but then the judges were like, how do we judge this against the trifold board? So they were like, you can't go any farther. But to your point, it kind of made me realize, like, wow, technology can really differentiate. And then I mentioned the second one. It was a teacher, Diane Van Osdale. And she similarly was like, it was a computer competition. It was called ThinkQuest. I don't know if they still have it or not, but ThinkQuest was this international competition where you'd form teams. They couldn't be from your same school. It had to be like students from
Oh,
elsewhere in the world. Again, late 90s. So the internet was like kind of just a burgeoning thing.
yeah.
And formed a team. I think I did it 2 or 3 years in a row. We got pretty far one year. And yeah, it was make a web page. I ended up building something that had a database backend. I felt super cool at the time, teaching myself all that stuff. But yeah, that your question is, when did you feel like technology could sort of, be a differentiator? All that was it. It was those teachers pushing me forward and me teaching myself some of that stuff. So.
That's awesome. So you always had that passion. And what was one of your first jobs? Was it like a developer job out of college or a
Yeah. Oh,
programmer?
yeah. It's kind of a funny story. So, because like I mentioned, I had some teachers that kind of, pushed me and especially in high school. And one of them sort of taught me or pushed me to learn HTML. And
Mm.
so, the web was a new thing. And not to date myself here, but that was the 90s. So the
Hmm.
web was just sort of up and coming. And I spent the time learning HTML and at the time Perl, CGI, like some development languages, how to use databases, et cetera. So yeah, my first job out of school or in school, in high school when I turned 16, was working as a web developer at a life insurance market research association in Windsor, Connecticut on Day Hill Road, and building web applications so that their member companies could log in and download white papers and other sort of research materials, which was pretty forward
Yeah, in
at
the
the time
90s.
in the
Yeah.
late 90s. Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty interesting.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. You talk about, you mentioned it twice about how influential these teachers, these mentors are in our lives. And I did mention earlier that you are chairman of one of the schools or the schools both of your children go to.
So I'm on the board of trustees
Okay.
at the school that my two kids go to,
Hmm.
but I am on the advisory board of Launch Lab at URI,
Yep.
which is just great, and a bunch of other things too. What's really interesting is, you mentioned sort of the importance of teachers, educators,
Mm-hmm.
in our lives, in our kids' lives. So I am super excited when I get to do stuff like the hackathon at Rocky Hill,
Yeah.
and then the launch lab at URI, and then there's, the RiHub VMS stuff. So you end up with this sort of progression.
Yeah, that's
It's really
amazing.
just interesting. And the fact that Rhode Island sort of is supportive of all that stuff is great.
Well, we need people like you, that are doing that work, right? That are providing that mentorship, because you saw people that were mentors to you.
Yep.
And you mentioned in that K through 12, right? Or even higher ed. But when it comes to AI, right? We're in the AI Wave podcast, AI and education are going to be linked forever,
Yeah.
right? What is your view on how K through 12, let's just focus on that, should be thinking about AI?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so to your point, I think that AI is sort of becoming this like sea change in education. I mean, for one, I think one really, really important part is it allows for more personalized learning, which is good for anyone, right? So a teacher can more easily curate certain lesson plans or allow for students to have a more individualized, curriculum. So I think that's a major positive.
Yeah.
I think, of course, there's going to be risk around students, especially before they've understood some of the fundamentals and foundations of this stuff, or really understood what like truth, sort of like what's a first party source, like what, that sort of stuff, I think adds some risk. So I think, if you have educators or like librarians, for example, right now trying to help kids understand what should we believe from this news source or what should we believe from that news source and help them sort of vet those things. I think the same thing is true with AI. It's like just because it generates some content doesn't mean it's actually legit, real, truthful content. So I do think there's this whole aspect of AI is a tool. Students should become comfortable with using it, but they also have to understand whether what's coming out of it is actually considered a source or not, or is it just sort of fodder for debate?
That's a great point, right? Like we want to educate our students on how to utilize this tool, but we also want to educate them on the true basis of what's real, right? Because the line is going to be incredibly blurry of what's true and what's not due to AI and deep fakes and all of that.
We've had this problem before AI and deep fakes, right? When I go read this news source, and we've all seen some of the news that propagates across social media, how do I know, especially around election time, right? We're heading into an election season. How do I know that this news story is true or that? And there's been, a lot around understanding your sources and all that, obviously all that kind of stuff, right? Regardless of whether it's election time or not. But it's even doubly true to your point when you now have to contend with, man, that looks really legitimate. I can see somebody I recognize saying these words
in his or her voice.
In his or her voice. So I do think there's a lot of critical thinking that has to go into some of that. Yeah.
So critical thinking is another thing that we need to be focused on in our education. Emotional intelligence is another thing that we need to be focusing on. And my thing that I've been saying lately is we cannot be punishing our students for utilizing this tool and tell them, do not use this tool, do not use this tool. And then once they graduate, they go into the workforce and we're like, use this tool, right? Yeah. We need to train them on how to best use this tool. And just like they could cheat with the internet in a way, right? They could cheat with AI, but those are the folks that aren't going to get far. Yep. So it's an education within education from the staff and faculty, as well as students learning differently as well.
Oh, well, 100%. I mean, before there were calculators, I'm sure then the calculator arrived on the scene and everyone was like, oh my God, exactly. They're going to be able to do this math so quick. But that's, it becomes a tool to then push students to the next level and the next level. So all these tools sort of stack. The internet is a great example. Computers were a great example before the internet. The internet was a great, so I think all of that, is right. And AI is just a tool, and we have to understand that. It's a tool that has garnered very quick adoption. It's a tool that has the ability to disrupt a lot of what we consider sort of the norms. But, if you think back to what the purpose of the educational system was, this is going back, a long way to the sort of the British Empire, right? Mm-hmm. The whole reason we had these formalized sort of educational systems anyway was so that we could churn out people that could do efficient jobs and, factories or, whatever it might be. Well, here we are. We're talking about efficiency, productivity, collaboration. That's what these tools are for. So yes, it may push things forward and we may need to be more critical about it, but it is a tool and it can absolutely, change people's lives for the better too.
Well said. And I also like how you said it could be more tailored, right? So I'm envisioning my son's is younger. He's only 1.5. When he gets a little bit older, they will be an AI tutor bot, robot, physical form or not,
Sure.
that will be training and teaching him, right? Specifically on his intelligence level, emotional level, how he learns. And we're now going to be able to customize and personalize learning programs with the help of AI, I assume, moving forward.
Yeah, it's been happening for a few years. It's only gotten, I think, more advanced with some of the generative AI for content creation. But there was a professor. It was at a university in Australia. I don't remember exactly where, but even 3-4 years ago, this was sort of during, I think, COVID or right around then. There he was using, he was ingesting the results of exams that his students would take and personalizing content for them to better prepare
Mm.
themselves by saying, hey, listen, it looked like you had issues with these 5 problems on the test. Here's 5 additional readings that you can do. And that was just sort of, I don't want to say rudimentary, but
Like
that
manual?
was, yeah, I mean, I'm sure there was automation there, but it was not generative. It wasn't like,
Yeah.
here's a whole bunch of custom created content. Fast forward a few years, right? And now we've got the ability to sort of ingest all the work that I as a student might be delivering into the teacher and submitting, and it can give me custom feedback on it. It can give me a direction to take my educational journey,
Mm.
and it can help me with things that I might be weak in. So yeah, I think generative AI has massive potential in the curated and sort of customized and personalized learning realms. Yeah.
And when it comes to the kids, we'll focus on that for one more question here, as I'm curious. And our educational system, especially here in Rhode Island, they need to be considering it. I know the city of Providence, the school board for Providence, had just discussed with Travis Escobar incorporating an AI task force, just focusing on that, which is really what we need to see. But when it comes to safety, right, just like any other tool and technology
Mhm.
out there, how can we ensure that the youth is utilizing AI in a safe way? And what responsibility does AI companies have to ensure that there isn't a misuse for our next generation that's coming up? Loaded question.
Yeah, I mean, it's a loaded question, and it's an important one for us, sort of all to be reconciling with, because it's not just the students that are potentially, using AI and sharing information that maybe we don't want them sharing. I talk to businesses all the time who are like, "Yeah, we've been using the free, Chat GPT from OpenAI," and it's like, "Great. What sort of questions you asking? What are you pasting into that?" And it's like, oh, like legal documents and whatever. And it's like, okay, well, that's a free service, and that content might be used for future training. There are ways around all that. I'm sure we'll address that later.
Yeah.
But to your question about sort of kids, I think that if a school is going to say this is the AI tool set or the couple of AI tools that we want you to use, maybe one for content creation, one for maybe image creation or whatever, they have a responsibility to vet those,
Mm.
understand the privacy and compliance, governance policies around all that sort of stuff, and give the kids some sort of guidelines, just like we would with any other new technology. Provide them some guidelines for what is appropriate usage of the technology.
So now let's shift, because now I'm intrigued about what you were going to say when it comes to businesses, because there is an increase in adoption for AI with businesses, which is great to
That's
see.
great.
We've been on a panel. We asked the audience how many are using some type of like ChatGPT, for instance,
Yep.
and almost everyone raised. Now, to be fair, it was a tech summit. But, in other talks that we've been on separately, we asked that question, and there's a lot of hands that are being raised.
Yep.
But they may not know what they're doing, right? Just like social media is free, and in turn, we give them our rights, we give them our privacy,
Tons of
right?
information.
So same thing with these LLMs, right?
Yep.
We're giving them a lot of information and data to be trained on. For businesses, especially, let's say my wife, who's in, let's say, the healthcare industry, that is a lot of privacy concerns. What can businesses do to adopt AI in a safe way where their data is protected?
Yeah. So when we were at that PBN summit together, and the question was asked, how many of your businesses are using generative AI or AI technologies, right? And a sea of hands went up, right?
Mm-hmm.
I recognize people in that audience that were in education, financial services, healthcare. So when those hands went up, I mean, I kind of felt a little anxious for a little while there, because for as long as there has been computers and the internet and all that, we've had this problem, and this is sort of taking the security answer a little bit, of what we call shadow IT, right? Which is people solving their own technology challenges with the tools that they find out there, rather than the ones that their organization has vetted and is providing to them. So when you talk about shadow IT, it could be as simple as, oh, my organization gives me, SharePoint, OneDrive, whatever, but I'm going to use Google Drive and Dropbox, right? And it sort of circumvents the sort of IT, governance model that an organization might put in place. So when all those hands went up in the audience, I was thinking to myself, I wonder if some of these people that are raising their hands are talking about the free Chat GPT.
They're going rogue.
Yeah, they've gone rogue, shadow IT, right? And or are they using tools that their organizations have vetted and have some sort of model around? Because it is absolutely possible. We do this all the time. It is absolutely possible to deploy a private, generative AI tool like ChatGPT, but within your organization's walls, your organization's tenant, let's say, where the information cannot be used by, the like ChatGPT, for example, OpenAI, right? It's your organization's data stays within your organization. It's not retrained. It's not, you can source your own company's, private information within that tool, all that kind of stuff. There's the ability to do that. And I'm wondering how many of those organizations are actually doing that.
Maybe one or two.
I
And
don't
then we had a better luck with that summit, but tell our audience, let's say like I'm a medium-sized business.
Yep.
I want to fine tune a model. I want our team to just use this model.
Yep.
How would they go about it? What are some of the tools that they would need?
Yep. So when we work with organizations, there's really the two sides of it. One is sort of the delivery of the generative AI tool, which is saying, hey, this is the tool you're going to use. We've customized it for our organization's jargon and whatever it might be, the stuff that matters to us, maybe our SOPs, our standard operating procedures, whatever, stuff that's important to my organization. So this is the tool we're going to use. And that's the AI side. Then there's the security side, which is saying, but I also need to block you from using the other ones because I don't want our sensitive information to get outside the walls of our organization. So when we do that sort of stuff for customers, and we do it frequently, we'll deploy usually on Microsoft Azure, something like the Azure OpenAI stack and Azure Cognitive Services, which allows us to say, hey, any data your organization has in Teams, SharePoint, whatever, that gets ingested into the model. So it becomes yours. It's custom to your organization rather than just this general LLM. You can still do fine tuning on it. You can still do prompt engineering, all the stuff that you would normally do, as well as other parameters around sort of truthiness, or how creative is it going to be versus how factual is it going to be, tailored to your organization's desires, as well as putting security parameters and stuff around it. A quick example of that might be, if you're on the leadership team of an organization versus if you're just lower in the organization, both of those people could ask the LLM the exact same question, but get different answers because you have access to different documents in the organization as a member of the leadership team than somebody else. So, if that person asks, what's the secret plan, for 2024, they're not going to get an answer that's going to be as relevant to the document you've been working on, right? So that's the AI side. The security side then is, how do we stop people from leaking information to the public AI tools? And that's no different than any other sort of organizational selection of tools and blocking access to tools and things like that.
So when it comes to the model, let's say the LLM, like what's the user interface? Would it be, let's say if you use that example, would it still be a Chat GPT interface?
Yeah, we have a private OpenAI interface deployed for our organization. Everyone's got it pinned to their Windows taskbar or Mac bar at the bottom of the screen. When they click it, it opens up a web page just like any ChatGPT interface that you've seen out on the internet, or any LLM out on the internet. It's a chat interface, so you can ask it questions, and it keeps sessions persistence over the conversation. But it also sources information from our organization, so you can ask it questions about things we've done, projects we've worked on, clients we've worked with. But yeah, it's just a chat interface.
And you could have an external version too that clients could use as a chatbot.
Yeah, you could put in the client portal. They can ask questions of their contract and their project and their, absolutely.
Great. Well, we're going to have to talk because I know we're definitely building something here at
Good.
Trailblaze.
Good.
But, if someone is interested, they can probably reach out to you at
Of
Infused
course.
Innovations
Yep.
if they're thinking about this. And I know you guys have some good content that comes out as well that will be helpful. So in one of the contents that you did recently was about cybersecurity and AI. I attended it. It was on LinkedIn. It was really helpful. A lot of jargon, maybe some of it that I didn't
It's a little
understand.
technical in a few
It was
places.
a little technical in a few places, but it was really helpful. But AI has also not been helpful when it comes to cybersecurity. Now, there actually are ways where you can use AI to improve your cybersecurity, as you're all talking about. But for our audience, what is the way that the cybersecurity industry is looking at AI? What are the biggest concerns that you all have, and what are some of the biggest opportunities that there is as well?
Yeah. So I'll start with the opportunities because I'm
Okay.
super excited about what AI can potentially bring to organizations, especially in this just crazy landscape of constant threats to organizations. I mean, the landscape. I talked about this on the webinar. The landscape of threats is quite. It's fast moving. It's persistent. It's really
Yeah.
dangerous right now. And the threat actors are using AI to more quickly attack us all. So why
Yeah.
shouldn't we be? Eventually it's just going to be AIs fighting each other, right? I think I've
Yeah.
seen that movie.
Yep.
Right. So there are definitely ways that AI is improving the cybersecurity landscape. One is XDR.
Mm-hmm.
So XDR stands for either cross-domain detection and response. A lot of people like to talk about it that way because it takes signals from many, many different sources, or you could call it, sort of extended detection and response, that kind of thing. Different people call it different things. Point being that it allows for an organization to do automatic attack disruption. So as opposed to waiting for some sort of signal to get escalated to a cybersecurity analyst or some incident response to happen, which can take time. I mean, we're all human. It'll affect an automatic attack disruption in real time, which is really important because even if it's not accurate 100% of the time, even if 99% of the time we can stop an attack before it can laterally move within an organization, that's huge. And that uses artificial intelligence to analyze these millions of signals in real time. That's just one example. There's a lot of other ones. I talked about threat intelligence platforms. I talked about Copilot, Microsoft Security Copilot on the webinar. That's really important because it allows for organizations to see what's happening in real time, but also have sort of summaries of the attack written, which is also can be really important when you're talking about communication within an organization or to a customer. That could be really important. And then there's things around user entity behavior analytics, right? And I talked about this on the webinar too. It's not, it used to be what's the normal activity that Chris does on a day that an organization does on a daily basis, right? And then it became a little bit more fine-tuned, and it was okay, taking the organization in its entirety is just too broad, so let's focus on what's normal behavior for this department, right? Okay, well, that's a little bit more narrow, and this department has different trends. They're the sales department, they use Salesforce, so that's normal for them to be moving data in and out of Salesforce, as an example. But now, with AI, we can have this sort of micro personas. You're in the marketing, world. It's all about targeting and segmentation and persona building and all that. It's the exact same thing in cybersecurity. We want to know what's normal for Chris when he works from this location on this device. Because in order to know what's abnormal for Chris, so we know if Chris is getting attacked, we need to know what's normal. So that's sort of, again, I went through that a little quick, but that's sort of the promise of AI. You asked about the risks too. I mean, the risks, of course, are one, maybe we're affecting automatic, attack disruption too aggressively. That can, disrupt productivity within an organization.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering when you were talking about the XDR, I believe,
Yep.
is what if they get it wrong?
Sure.
Like, what is just a user now just has a disruption of their day, and then there's now the IT person has to manually, now you disrupted their day.
Yeah.
Is that pretty much what it is? But it could be solved probably within a quick time frame.
Yes to all of that. So first off, the AI, when we talk about automatic attack disruption, at least in the Microsoft ecosystem, which is the one I'm most familiar with, We're talking about hunter-trained AI. So we're talking about, here's attacks that have actually happened in the past, and we're going to train the AI when we see these signals, when we see this sort of stuff happening, that means there's an attack happening. So they're trained at the 99% signal to noise ratio, which is important, which means there's a potential of 1% or less false positive. So to your question, if it automatically disrupts an attack that isn't actually an attack, what does that mean to the user? It means either their device might have been quarantined, or it means that their user account might have been disabled. But in these portals, the IT or the security team basically has a big undo button right next to it. So if I get, my account disabled, accidentally by the AI, or my device is quarantined off the network so a threat can't move laterally, and it wasn't actually a threat and it shouldn't have been, I would, call up my IT guy and say, hey, something bad happened. And yeah, he would click undo and I'd be back up and running. But much better that we disrupted an attack incorrectly, 1% incorrectly and 99% correctly, because these attacks move very, very rapidly and they can spread across an organization. And we're talking about reputational risk, financial loss. There's a lot there.
Yeah, it seems the juice is worth the squeeze there, So
generally.
that's great. So, I mean, you make a good point. Eventually it's going to be AI bots versus AI bots just duking it out.
Right.
And whoever has the better
AI.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So, but at least there's some positives, right? There's some opportunities of how we can utilize AI to combat and enhance our cybersecurity.
Right. And at the same time, we're benefiting so many other aspects of our lives, I'd like to think. Increased productivity, better understanding of, we've all, gotten faced with the 35-page, end user licensing agreement that we're like, how the heck am I supposed to read that? It would take me, 10 years to read all of that. It's the kind of thing where, ChatGPT can make quick work of summarizing that sort of stuff, right?
Use that,
So I do think there are major productivity and collaboration benefits and sort of brainstorming benefits and all that kind of stuff, besides all the cybersecurity side. So it's pretty exciting. It's exciting times.
All right. So yeah, opportunities of AI. You just talked about it on the cybersecurity side. You started to talk about it on the individual side of how it gives us more time to be creative, to be strategic. Let AI do the mundane tasks so we can do what we love. But when it comes to small businesses, let's say, how can they adopt AI? They may not have a huge budget, or even like a solar entrepreneur. Like, what can they do that's feasible today to start utilizing AI for their business?
Yeah, I mean, I think businesses of any size, but especially the smaller ones, can leverage generative AI in a couple ways. First off, if you have a meeting and you keep a transcript of that meeting, there's no reason why you need to sort of manually transcribe or go back and reread it and come up with your bulleted list of, action items or tasks or whatever. There are, at this point, a dozen or more tools out there that will basically synthesize the meeting into a nice little summary, create a bunch of bullets of to-dos and tasks, maybe assignments. It might have heard somebody say, I volunteer to do this task, great. Assign that to them. Don't make me do it, So I think the whole concept of like a I don't want to say like a butler, but like to basically like a
an executive assistant.
To basically be there to just sort of, keep the notes and keep the meeting minutes and all that kind of stuff. I think that's, certainly one easy one. And then, the whole concept of, write an email in my tone, that could save a lot of time, if you've got an email that you need to write or RFP response or something that you need to write. You can give, Microsoft Copilot's a great example of that. It's in, if depending on the size of your organization, it may be something you have access to now, it may be something you have access to in the future, but certainly like ChatGPT or whatever, you can paste in an example of text that you've written and say, now write me something in that style, and it can absolutely save a lot of time, if you have to just sort of do a generalized response to something. And I think we're going to see it built into a lot more tools that small businesses use.
That's the thing, is a lot of tools, especially in our industry and in marketing, AI is incorporated into all of them. You don't need an AI tool. You just need your tool that has AI.
Sure.
Canva, Adobe Creative.
Yeah, HubSpot. everything these
Exactly.
days. Yep.
Exactly. Has a lot of them in there. So they're already used to it, whether, they don't have to buy, but there are some great examples like you mentioned. And ChatGPT Plus is $20 a month. If they can afford that, they can do a lot more and maybe create their own little GPT that speaks in their tone or
Right.
about their business and just start utilizing it in that way. So it is exciting because AI allows you to just do more, and not just from a production level, but from a strategic level, so that we can focus on what we're most passionate about. And when that happens, people do great things.
Yeah, they do. And the only caution I give, I say 100% yes to all of that. The only caution I give people is if you're in a regulated industry, financial services, healthcare, you have some industry framework that you need to align to, HIPAA, PCI, Sarbanes-Oxley, whatever it might be. Just be mindful of where you're pasting that sensitive information. Maybe
Yeah.
don't use your ChatGPT subscription for sensitive stuff. Maybe use your own, Azure OpenAI, protected instance, for example, just to be careful about what information goes where.
And Infused Innovations, they can help you with all of that.
Yes.
And you talked about Copilot, right? Microsoft just had their Ignite. And before we get into Ignite and some of the top maybe lessons that you can tell our audience from it, let's talk about Copilot for a second. From what I understand, you need an enterprise license in order to use the full power of Copilot. Is that correct?
So Copilot, let's unpack that.
Okay.
Copilot's a bit of a, it's sort of a generalized term at this point. There can be many copilots. Copilots are basically like assistants, but there can be copilots as an organizational framework where, I'm trying to think of a good example. I'm the weather company and I want to build a copilot so people can ask questions about the weather. That doesn't require any enterprise subscription. That just requires somebody from, for example, the Weather Channel deciding to build one.
So that's like a GPT.
Yeah, exactly. But to that content. And you can pick any organization on the planet, any enterprise on the planet, and they could build a copilot, right? That could go to users. The
Do you need a license for that?
So the enterprise would have to make a choice to do it and sort of put some development resources towards it. But those are copilots speaking sort of as a tool. What you're talking about is the Microsoft 365 Copilot. I believe that is 300 users or more in an organization currently allow access to that. And then you've got Security Copilot, which, again, a copilot, but specific to security. And those are for enterprises currently. I think it's like a minimum of $100,000 a year or something like that. So there's absolutely these tiers. But like with any other technology, it starts, expensive and unattainable, and it becomes common use for everyone. So I think we'll start seeing that.
So right now, mid-sized business, let's say Trailblaze Marketing, if we wanted to use Microsoft Copilot, where it's integrated into Outlook, PowerPoint, Teams, it's not available for these standard businesses, only enterprise?
I think there's a subscription plan that's $30 a month or something like that. But I think, at least at this point, they're probably trying to limit the sort of number of users that sign up. So they're probably focused more on certain organizations.
Yeah,
but
I think what I saw is the enterprise license is required.
E-Series licenses probably rather than Business Premium or something. So, and that starts at 300 users, I think, something like that.
Oh,
However, if you wanted to deploy a ChatGPT, that's that little web interface that's specific to all the content you might have in, SharePoint or your file server, whatever. You could do that today. You could do that a year ago. Well, not quite a year ago, but earlier this year, using Azure Cognitive Search and Azure OpenAI. You put those two in your Azure tenant. You give the URL to your staff, and you protect it using Azure AD, which is probably how users log into their email today. And then, you've got your own ChatGPT that's customized to Trailblaze Marketing's content.
Okay, similar to what we were talking about earlier, but not necessarily they're going to be in Microsoft Microsoft PowerPoint Copilot,
right,
where they're going to do their magic.
Right, it'd be a little web page you have open on the side, copy and paste. But no, the version that sits inside PowerPoint, Excel, Word, Outlook, etc., incredibly useful. The ability to say, take my notes from this OneNote document. Take this PowerPoint template that I built, a year ago that I just love, and build me something new, combining those two things. Yes, that is currently sort of the holy grail, I think, of productivity there. That's cool.
And then create a project plan within Planner, and then send a message within Teams, and then create an email within Outlook.
You got it.
I just can't wait for that.
Yeah, tell the story. That's great.
So, but Microsoft, I mean, they're really stepping it up over the past 12 months, and they made quite the strategic decision to partner with OpenAI.
$10 billion investment, I believe.
It's a great investment.
It's a good investment.
And recently, as we are recording this podcast, we are just recording it after the crazy weekend where Sam Altman was fired.
Friday evening, the coup.
The coup d'etat.
Was heard around the world. Yeah, Friday evening, Sam Altman was let go by the OpenAI board. I think, I'm sure this is not overly relevant, but, a nonprofit and a for-profit sort of management intertwined a bit. The OpenAI, I think, nonprofit board said, you know what, Sam Altman, you're done, which was a shock to everyone.
It was a shock to Sam.
It was a shock to Sam. It was a shock to, I would say, the staff of OpenAI,
yes,
who came out and said, if he doesn't come back, we're out. We'll go somewhere else. And then, of course, as we know, over the weekend, Satya Nadella, the CEO at Microsoft, said, you know what, there's a happy home for you here if you'd like it. And then we heard that Sam may end up back at OpenAI if there's some leadership changes, some governance changes. So we'll see. We're sort of in the middle of this right now as we're recording this.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's quite the tech drama.
It is.
I was so excited, but also in shock, right? Because you think of Sam Altman, especially in this era that we're in, he's the face.
He really is. And he's a visionary face. It's almost like somebody said, ChatGPT, write me a J.J. Abrams style, here's my prompt engineering. Sorry to everyone who's better at this than I am. But, write me a J.J. Abrams style coup at a tech company, for Sam Altman. And
it's crazy.
It's crazy.
And the rumors are that it has a lot to do with AGI. Have you heard that?
Yes. GPT-5.
Yep.
The future, artificial general intelligence. Yes.
And that general intelligence is here.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of the co-founders is very ethical based, right? And Sam Altman is very pragmatic, fund-based, right? He knows that he needs Microsoft dollars and computing power in order to make this happen. And it sounds like, there's a, it doesn't sound like, there clearly is a disagreement on the direction of OpenAI, which, as much as I'm a fan of Sam Altman and what he's been doing, I do have concerns about AI, right? And if there is one of the leading AI companies ensuring that they're on an ethical path, that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And
but this is all speculation.
No, I mean, it's fair enough to say there are concerns around what is AI being used for. And by the way, these concerns are geopolitical too. It's not even just what's happening at OpenAI or Microsoft or Amazon or Google or whatever. It's the geopolitical ramifications of, okay, the United States is putting some guardrails on AI, but what's to say, other countries are doing the same thing. So there's a lot happening here. We could probably spend hours talking about, and, it's a valid conversation. And I'll use Microsoft, sort of as an example here. They have a responsible AI certification that companies can go through. We got Infused Innovations got a responsible AI certification back in, I think it was late 2019. So we saw the writing on the wall that, AI is not slowing down. We need to make sure that our staff that are developing solutions in AI are doing it with an eye towards, is it trustworthy? Is it responsible? Is it fair?
Is it secure?
Is it secure? All of these things. So that was something we took seriously. We went and got certified in it. We have we go for recertification every year. And a lot of other companies are doing the same thing. And then, you hear the news out of the White House, which is, well, everyone that's doing development in AI needs to follow these certain responsible AI principles. It's like, check. We agree. We agree.
Right.
And I think the industry generally agrees. Your question about AGI, though, is really interesting. I don't think GPT-5 would rise to the level of what we would call AGI. I do think it probably, just like GPT-3 and GPT-4, shocked and amazed us and got people really paying attention. I'm sure it will do the same thing. When you start allowing AI to use tools to do other things and interface with other systems and pull data from other places and do really interesting things, I do think it starts feeling really creepy sometimes. Because you're like, wow, I gave it one prompt and it managed to do these 20 things. That feels general, right?
Right. I think it's the rate that's also scary for folks,
Yeah.
but also what prevents them from understanding that we are in one of the craziest times of our lives right now. The next 3 years is pretty much going to define the many decades to come. And the rate of change is not like how it used to be. I was getting a little frustrated with government folks as they're telling me, well, it's not, they're not feeling it today, so they're not going to act.
Mhm.
Well, if we're going to do that, we're going to have it smack our face,
Right.
and we're going to be too late to
Ab-
react.
As we have been many times in the past. Look at data privacy regulation. Look at social media regulation. We didn't do anything. Even Europe, who tends to act more quickly than us, was a little bit behind. The GDPR stuff obviously happened, and that helped quite a bit with data privacy. I don't have to tell you guys that. You guys know. Your
Yeah.
customers probably have to deal with that every day.
Yeah.
But here in the United States, I think we're behind on data privacy. We're behind on social media regulation. And I tell businesses all the time, because CEOs are like, well, yeah, I want my staff using AI, but I don't really need to be taking it too seriously until I see my competitors doing it. I mentioned this at the PBN summit.
Right.
Yeah, if you're waiting for your competitors to be out in the market with something, that means they started 6 or 12 months ago.
Yeah.
So you're already 6 or 12 months behind. It's the same thing on the government side. If we wait until the cat is out of the bag so far down, the road, not to mix metaphors, but so far down the road, it's too late. We need to be very proactive about this sort of stuff, but we also need to be thoughtful about the benefits it can bring and the geopolitical ramifications, to speak sort of macro, level, the geopolitical ramifications of us being overly strict, let's say, when other countries are probably not feeling the same way.
And at the state level, if we don't act, we're just going to be, Rhode Island's going to be the last one again to react. And that's why Rhode Island really needs to step it up and make sure that they are proactive for once, and ensuring that we can be leaders. We have all the tools, the tech, the universities,
We do.
the beautiful quality of life. We have it all here. And imagine if we don't take advantage of this opportunity, we'll be regretting it.
I agree. And it was one of the reasons I was actually so proud that Rhode Island Commerce and the state of Rhode Island and Southern New England more broadly was awarded the Ocean Tech Hubs designation.
Yes. Yeah.
Because, it wasn't just ocean tech, it was ocean tech, but as it relates to things like artificial intelligence and machine learning and underwater autonomous vehicles and material sciences, all things that require technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning. So I really think that we're in a moment right now where we have the ability to lead, to actually set some policy and direction. Really, really important. I'm excited about it. We're one of the only corporate consortium members at Infused, so I was really proud when the EDA designation came across, and a lot more to come, I'm sure.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
very
Well, that's
excited.
great for the Ocean State.
Yep.
Well, this is great. I've really been appreciative of this conversation. But I do want to give you the opportunity, if there's anything that you didn't chat about that you'd want to share. But one question as you're thinking about that is, what message would you have to aspiring technologists, right? Let's say like they're in high school or they're in college and they're about to enter a world that's completely different, right? I was just at Bryant University's Entrepreneurship Expo,
Yep.
and I talked to a student that decided to no longer do marketing because of the way that the industry was changing, and went more on the tech side of things. But looking at those techies, what advice would you say to those young aspiring technologists?
Right. I think it's interesting because, when I was in school, choosing a path that was techie put you in a certain category of student, we'll say,
Yeah.
versus some of the other paths. But technology is infused into everything we do these days. When I started Infused Innovations, it was because I really did believe that there's the ability for any organization, regardless of size, to infuse, either technology or innovation or these tools that we talk about into their business processes. So, what would I tell aspiring students? I would tell them, don't be afraid of technology, experiment with it, think globally. I think it's easy to sort of focus on the problems we face in our sort of daily lives and the sort of microcosm that is Rhode Island. We should be thinking about our communities, but think globally. There are problems around the world that technology can solve, but there's this sort of, we'll say, undemocratic distribution of technology. We saw it years ago with the digital divide. We still see it. I should say, not just years ago, but we saw it, especially during COVID.
Right.
We saw some students had the means to continue their education very, very, um, in a different way, but still, very productively. During COVID, and then other students were just completely disenfranchised and really lost a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that digital divide gets exacerbated by things like this, where you mentioned a little while ago all the technical and computing power that it takes to do this sort of stuff. That are automatically creates sort of an unlevel playing field. The ones who can afford it can do it. The ones who can't
Right.
can't. So,
Right. But it does bring a democratization in a way, AI, where it kind of levels the playing field so that maybe an independent artist can compete with the Hollywood
Yeah.
studios, I say, and a small business can also almost have the same technology as a Fortune 1000 company, right? So there is some type of level field, which I think is exciting for the little guy to compete with. So
Well, there's a truth to it. Just to bring it back to Rhode Island, right? I
Right.
mean, we've got companies in Rhode Island. There's one over in Newport that we work with that they take photos of the seafloor. I think I've told you this story before. And they take both sort of top-down photos, so you can sort of see the surface of the sediment and all that kind of stuff. And then they penetrate the sediment with a camera that's in a housing and take a picture of the sediment from the side.
Mm.
And that gives them a really complete understanding of the health of that ecosystem. So that's really important if you're talking about, where do I build wind turbines? Where do I lay cables? What's the health of the fisheries in this location? Where should I dredge for better shipping, or whatever it might be? All these different use cases. And, if you're taking tens of thousands of photos of the seafloor or of anything, let's talk about agricultural technology, let's talk about really anything. How else can you analyze those at scale and bring benefits to the world if not through computer vision and machine learning and algorithmic understanding of things? There's absolutely use cases here in Rhode Island and nationally and globally, whether it's to deal with the food supply, aging populations, healthcare, the oceans, our global warming. I mean, there's so many different use cases. So your question about what do you tell, students, it's like, yeah, explore that. Like, figure out how you can change the world with this stuff.
AI will allow us to solve the world's problems.
I hope so.
That's great. Well, thank you, Jeff. And if anyone wants to reach out to you, we didn't get to talk about Microsoft Ignite, but on LinkedIn, you do have a blog you recently posted.
I think yesterday we posted a blog about the top 10 announcements out of Microsoft Ignite. We post content, I think, every week. So follow us on the web or LinkedIn. Reach out to me if I can chat with you and help your business. Always love to have these conversations, Chris.
Well, I appreciate your time, Jeff.
Thank you.
All right. Wow, that was a great episode. Thank you so much, Jeff, for joining us today and sharing your knowledge and expertise and some of your great stories. I mean, I couldn't believe that as a young high school student in the 90s, not to throw that out there with your age, I was, a little younger, but as your kid in the 90s, imagine that, seeing a trifold brochure and having a little touch screen in the middle of it. I mean, that kind of speaks to how innovative he is and how he'll always think about how we can incorporate, or rather I say infuse, innovative technologies. And there's no better one than AI, as we just discussed. You have to make sure that you are doing it in a secure, ethical, and responsible way. He gave us some feedback on how to do that, and also talked about the wonders and greatness of AI and all the opportunity that it brings us. So I hope you learned some new things. We'll have some great content in the show notes as well for you to follow up on. And then until then, keep rocking on and ride this AI wave.